his approach.
Mm-hmm.
His approach is, I think, what makes him likable by Republicans.
Gotcha.
I think that he is likable and he tries to get to know people and be their friends. And I think, like for
Mm-hmm.
example, him and the Lieutenant Governor Spencer Cox, they're pretty good friends, even though Cox is a Republican and McAdams is a
Mm-hmm.
Democrat. And so he knows how to get along with people who may have different political views from him. He's able to separate the personal from the political, which can be beneficial.
Well, Kason, is there anything else that you want to make sure that people know about Utah politics or the young vote in Utah?
I want to emphasize the point that even though we may not have a lot of representatives in the state house or state senate or a lot of representation nationally, just that the Democrats in Utah are a dedicated group. I've been able to meet a lot of really committed, bright people who are doing everything they can to try to make the state better for all the people living in it.
Well, that's great, and thank you for the work that you're doing. I love hearing about states like Utah that have good Democrats in them, so thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, of course. On the line with us right now, we have Courtney Marden, who is the founder of the Indivisible chapter in Utah. Hello, Courtney.
Hi.
Thanks so much for joining us. So first, I just want to say that I'm excited that Utah has an Indivisible group.
Yes, we actually have several. So I don't want to take all the credit, but we've got Moab Indivisible, Salt Lake Indivisible, Ogden Indivisible. So we've got a few spread out throughout the state.
That is excellent. So can you tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got to the point of founding an Indivisible group?
Well, I started out pretty conservative. Grew up in a LDS family, that's be a Mormon family, and we tend to be pretty conservative. Did move out here to Utah about 20 years ago and actually just became more progressively progressive as I saw some of the limitations around conservative government and also the extremes in the kind of the national stage. The extremes of the Republican Party seem to feel less and less true to my morals and my ethics. So fast forwarding to this most recent presidential election, I was, of course, devastated when Trump was elected. It was actually November 8th, of course, that night. We kind of knew he was going to be elected, and November 9th is actually my birthday. And so around the time of midnight, I was still listening. I was actually working. I'm a nurse, and my shift ended around midnight, and I was just going crazy and pacing and just couldn't believe that this was not an episode of The Twilight Zone. And around midnight, it was the last few holdout organizations were calling the election. I thought, wow, this is my birthday. this is my life. So just kind of watching, everything play out in the horror and learning about the Indivisible. I guess at the time it wasn't yet a movement. It was just a set of ideas. And so I started looking into that and deciding, well, I'm from this point on, I'm going to be very involved in politics because I can't afford not to be. And so I formed Utah Indivisible on December 19th and started out slow. And then by January, we were having hundreds of members. Then February, we're having thousands of members. And it's just continued to snowball from there to this. At this point, I think we have 8,000 members.
That seems so surprising. When we think about Utah, we often think about a very conservative place. So that's promising that you have so many Indivisible members. And you guys have had some pretty high-profile actions as well.
Yes. The Jason Chaffetz's town hall in February, of course, was a viral event. And later, seemed to play a role in his resignation. It really does, the indivisible actions really do lead to consequences, even in a very, very conservative place like Utah.
Well, congratulations on his resignation.
Yeah.
Many of us are very, very, very happy about that. And, I think his district was probably among the top 5 most conservative districts in the nation. So getting him to bow out, that was just kind of beyond our wildest dreams. And right now we actually have, he's still very conservative. We have a much more progressive, by comparison, representative, John Curtis. So things are moving along.
You said that you grew up in a Mormon family. Do you think that the LDS Church still has a sort of an outsized influence in the politics of Utah?
Oh, absolutely. People do tend to look to the church, even though the church, is neutral in terms of politics. They don't weigh in on many issues. Usually it will be just really, really rare. They weighed in on gay marriage, and recently they weighed in on DACA, actually for in favor of the Dreamer, which was amazing. But it's very rare. But it's always talked about, like, it's just an open secret that, if you're a good Mormon, you vote Republican and you are a conservative. So it was really hard to break out of that mold. That's kind of what we're dealing with Mormon folks. Good Mormon folks is kind of getting them outside of that paradigm that you're a bad person if you want to vote for someone who's outside of that conservative Republican mold.
So let's talk some about the kinds of actions that you guys in Indivisible are working on right now. In an email to us, you told us that there are a lot of initiatives to gather signatures for ballot initiatives for November. So can you tell us a little bit about what some of those initiatives are?
Sure. So right now there are officially 5 ballot initiatives. There's going to be a sixth one so far, which is a long story, so I'm going to leave that to another time. But yeah, we have an initiative to legalize medical marijuana. We have an anti-gerrymandering initiative to create an independent commission to redraw our extremely gerrymandered districts, both state legislature and for our Utah congressional delegation. We have one for Medicaid expansion, which is probably my biggest passion as a nurse. There's one for increasing school funding through a mild sales tax increase. And then we have one, so Utah has a caucus convention system of electing the representatives, and it ends up electing like really, really extremely conservative, extreme candidates. And so we have the Count My Vote initiative that seeks to create a direct primary election in addition to the caucus system. So yeah, all of these we're really excited about.
And do you think that they all have a good chance of getting enough signatures?
Yes. One, because there's a lot of excitement among Utah Indivisible and other indivisible groups, other grassroots organizations. We also have church buy-in, not necessarily the LDS Church because they've stayed out of this, but like, for instance, with Medicaid expansion, you can sign the ballot initiative at your local Catholic church or your Episcopalian church. Mm-hmm. You can pick up a signature packet so you can gather signature yourself at these locations. AARP, there's just all sorts of organizations that are just throwing their weight in and doing whatever they can to help across the state. So we have quite a bit of activism related to that. People are not seeing the legislature jump in on these, and there's a huge amount of support for, I would say, all 5 of these. And we can back that up with polling. But the legislature has had several sessions to act on this, and they have not.
This is sort of outside of the scope of Utah, but, you said as a nurse that you're very interested in this Medicaid expansion initiative. It seems anecdotally like there are a lot of nurses who are very invested in sort of the resistance for lack of a better word, so in groups like Indivisible that I hadn't seen before, a sort of swelling up of nurses being part of political action in a way that it seems like I do now. Is that just something I'm seeing that's not really there, or have you seen anything like that too?
So I feel like that isn't just anecdotal. I feel like a lot of times nurses work with vulnerable populations, and we're seeing patients fall through the cracks. And so this is something that hurts us every day, and we're thinking about when we leave our shifts, what's going to happen to these patients? How are they going to afford these treatments? Are they going to die because they've been denied access to care? I'm a mental health nurse as well, and so that particularly is a very acute area for cracks in the healthcare system. So I think nurses are kind of propelled to activism just because we're dealing with these ethical issues every single day.
I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what you guys are doing for voter registration and get out the vote efforts. I'm really excited to hear about all the excitement in Utah. I'm wondering if you can tell us a little bit about what you're doing to get voters to turn out.
So we're starting small right now, or it seems to be small, because we're doing both signature gathering and voter registration at the same time. So right now we're kind of have this dual focus, but at all of our events in which we're gathering signatures, we have voter registration forms. We also have, for people who maybe are in a hurry and they don't have the 2 minutes to fill out a voter registration form, we have a little flyer that we give them with easy steps to go do it online. Utah has I would say a moderately easy system of voter registration, and so it doesn't take too much to guide people in the right direction. So right now we're doing that in tandem with signature gathering, and then signature gathering will actually end in April. That's the deadline. And then at that point, that will be our primary focus, will be voter registration. And then as it gets closer to November, we're going to make plans for get out the votes, how to, get your friends to the polls, who's going to drive, who's going to be people who can provide transportation all day, to people in the polls that they just need somebody to get them there and back. So that's kind of the game plan.
And if people want to get involved in that with you, especially people who live in Utah who maybe weren't aware of the Indivisible efforts, what's the best way for them to find out more about your group?
So the best way is to check out our Facebook group, Utah Indivisible. They can either join or it's a public group, so you're welcome just to lurk. But it's always nice to join because then you can get our calls to action. And then we have further instructions on signature gathering locations and the legality, just things that you have to know when you're gathering signatures for them to be legitimate, things like that. So that's where I would start. It's pretty simple.
Can we talk a little bit about the Senate race in Utah? Orrin Hatch is retiring, and so I know that you have a Democrat, Jenny Wilson, who's running, who seems to have at least a lot of Democratic support. Do you think that that is a race that's possibly flippable?
No, I'm really sorry. I'm probably going to donate to her campaign and, raise awareness and work on that. But Mitt Romney is going to throw his hat in the ring. It's basically by the end of the week, he's going to do it. And just the people of Utah and that Mormon connection, it just goes so far back, even to when he basically rescued the Salt Lake Olympics in 2002 from ruin. There was some mismanagement going on. And so between all of that and his presidential run, people here just love him. So I don't think that is flippable, but we do have a House race that is eminently flippable.
And that's the 4th district?
Yes. Mia Love is a 2-term congressperson. Actually, I think it's her 3rd term now that I think about it. Anyways, she's been just basically a terrible representative. She keeps a low profile. She doesn't sponsor too many bills. I feel like she has a really hard time, forming her own ideas and speaking for herself. She has not had a town hall since I think 2015. She's had a couple like telephone town halls, which we in Indivisible, you probably have seen it, we call them fake town halls because everything is like eminently screened and choreographed. She, in one town hall that she actually had, I think it was like a congressman from Texas actually on the call with her, sitting next to her, and he would answer the questions for her.
Oh, no.
That's how bad it was. Like, she cannot form her own answers.